Gang, I gotta tell you something. I miss Game of Zones. The epic stories, the inside jokes, the lore, the action, all of it. For those of you not in the know, a few years back, two brothers named Adam and Craig Malamut created a series mixing the dramatics of Game of Thrones with the dramatics of NBA basketball. In this fantasy world, the games are battles, the arenas are castles, and King James rules the East. From 2014 to 2020, it became a key part of both basketball culture and helped establish Bleacher Report as the hot new sports content site just after their acquisition by Warner Brothers. So that's all well and good. Fantasy and hoops are a winning combo. I could run down a laundry list of inside jokes and callbacks, but I want to go deeper. The question I want to ask is, do we need a Game of Zones as a basketball culture? Because in the dark days of the pandemic, that series finale felt as big as the finals. Like, obviously, it's a goofy cartoon fantasy show where Chris Bosh is a dragon and Doc Rivers is a good coach, but I think it was something bigger than that. This was something made out of love by a couple of basketball nerds that became a huge part of NBA culture. These guys were on Inside the NBA. You had active NBA players following the show. So what was Game of Zones, and why should you care? Let's find out. First, some background. In May 2018, the Malamut brothers went on Inside the NBA to talk about the series and how each episode gets made. To the surprise of the TNT crew, the brothers revealed that each episode took 6 weeks to produce, and these are for episodes that don't go longer than a few minutes. And I think that's a big part of why we haven't seen a similar show step up to the plate. Because this is really, really hard. The joy from watching a new episode of Game of Zones back in the day was balanced out only by the slog of waiting for the next season. That's not the fault of anyone involved. That's just how long it takes to do animation right. On top of that, there's the cost of paying all those animators and writers and voice actors and producers and everyone else involved in production. Bleacher Report's longest running show is Gridiron Heights, another excellent series parodying the world of football, currently in its 10th season. Part of why they've been able to remain in business and air weekly is by capping episodes at 1 to 2 minutes. Game of Zones concluded in 2020, just before the takeover of TikTok and Reels and short-form vertical video. In that kind of form factor, it's just much harder to build an overarching narrative. But if the series was so good, should any of that matter? Well, no, but we still run into the problem of cost. Fundamentally, a show as good as Game of Zones shouldn't exist now and probably shouldn't have existed back then or ever. It just doesn't make sense to produce a product of that quality. For example, let's say Warner Discovery found my channel tomorrow and put me in charge of original programming at Bleacher Report. They want me to create a new flagship show for the brand and they give me some money. I can either A, create a scripted animated series that would be really expensive with writers that I have to pay, that would only air once every few months, in a dying format, paid for by one YouTube pre-roll ad and one embedded ad. Or B, we sign a former professional athlete to a video podcast deal that gives me 7 hours of content a week, able to be chopped up into short form for TikTok, feature guests for cross promotion, and stuffed full of gambling ads. I mean, that's a pretty easy choice, isn't it? As a fan, I know what I'd want to see. As an executive with bosses to answer to and jobs on the line, you do what's best for business. I don't say that to be cynical, that's just the way the market is now. So why wasn't it like that back then? Well, as I said, Bleacher Report was part of this brand new generation of media startups in the 2010s. Maybe it doesn't feel that long ago, but the media landscape is completely different. Last decade, interest rates were basically nothing, and so taking on debt didn't matter, and so a company could make money off of valuation alone, profits be damned. The show Silicon Valley had a really interesting take on this, because it's so prominent in the world of tech. If a company has projections of revenue or projections of profit, then it's never enough. But if you're pre-revenue, there's all this potential, and so investors want to hop on to your site or your product. And that just isn't the case anymore. After the pandemic, interest rates got high and they've stayed high. A lot of those startups that came up around the same time as Bleacher Report, Grantland, 538, Vice, have since closed or suffered significant layoffs because their business model didn't work. In a stunning turn of events, it's very hard to make money from something that you give away for free. The best comparison I can give is TV of the late 2000s. After the writers' strike and recession, networks buckled their belts, and it's why we got an onslaught of reality shows for a few years there. Still, I think that Game of Zones was really good and maybe even necessary for us as a basketball community. because it made caring about the league an integral part of the show. I'll be honest, you can watch the show just as a fan of Thrones and still get a laugh out of it. But a true NBA fan can find all kinds of Easter eggs in the margins of just about every shot. Talking about all these little references was part of the fun of the show. And I think that's what we're missing as NBA fans. Media that makes following the league fun. In a season with 361 teams, a historic MVP battle, and the blockbuster trade of the century, we spent so much of last season just complaining. Our basketball media, on national broadcasts, on debate shows and podcasts, whatever, spent so much of the season finding reasons for all of us not to care. Because these guys are overpaid, or because they miss too many games, or because they don't care, or because they won't do my podcast. Game of Zones gave us fans reasons to care. Gave us reasons to find the Easter eggs, to create these inside jokes, to speculate about the next season. And I think that's what we need more than ever as NBA fans. Because the NBA isn't just a bunch of games on a calendar. It's an ecosystem. You can listen to pods, you can play 2K, you can watch high-quality analysis shows, or mine, on YouTube, and still feel like a fan without watching a minute of game time. I think that's what I'm saying, is that the ecosystem needs Game of Zones and other scripted shows so that this can still be a fun place to be. And so with all that, I hope I've convinced you to check out the show. Bleacher Report has full season compilations on YouTube, so go marathon it next chance you get. They still do a ton of great shows, but for me, none of them will top Game of Zones. Will we see another show reach the same heights? I don't know. It really was lightning in a bottle. You had a creative team working off of two strong brands with established fan bases, supported by an up-and-coming media company backed by one of the oldest conglomerates in the business, happening in an era that rewarded big swings. If you want to make your own, good luck with that.